is Windows. So episode 35, can y'all believe that we've been doing Meta Monday for this long? Um, and this is Oxford Farms, and we're iterating a lot on window types and wanted to speak to how we schedule them and how we then like display the windows themselves. So a lot of us run into issues where we're like, we need the certain mutton type, or we're running into, uh, hey, we're scheduling it, but then we need to have a rough opening and uh, where you can go and find this information, and then how we can make it to where you're not having to do that calculation yourself. You can let the family itself do the calculation. So this is a schedule that I worked on. This is building 2 in Oxford Farms. And so we have types, which are what everybody knows is that's what we're using to, as if I click into, let me come to here. If I click into this and I tab onto that, that's a 3-foot by 6-foot window, and it's a 2/2. So there's 2 lights over 2 lights. That's how we describe it. And so this is really controlled by 2 or 3 parameters. There's the mutton type option, and if you notice that there's a number next to this, and so if you look at the mutton option number, it is number 2. So it's telling me that that's the custom colonial. If I change this to 1, the formula is going to bump it to colonial standard. We don't use the colonial standard. We are always typically using the mutton option number 2. Now, some previous projects, we developed a 3/1 type. I've kind of worked through this because it tends to be very frustrating when you're like, but I need to have, um, what happened with the 3/1 was we just deleted the muttons out of the bottom. That's not the way it doesn't make it to where we can reuse it. So I've developed this to where you have the mutton custom colonial, and then you can set your muttons custom, you can set your number of lights, and this is per sash. So if we have 2, um, it's kind of confusing, but you have 2 lights, and then you have just the 1 on the bottom. So if I were to change this and say that that's 4, and I click apply, it would then update that to look like that. That looks terrible. But you can see how that you would definitely get a markup from Lewis on this one. So you can easily just sit back and change it back to that. Now, if you come down to the bottom, we have a bottom mutton visibility and a top mutton visibility. This is where we can get into the 3/1s, the 2/1s, to where you can just be like, there is no bottom, and I can turn that off completely, and then the bottom just disappears. So that all it is a visibility parameter that I'm turning on and turning off. So realize that if you're doing like a 3/1 or a 2/1, that don't just go and delete the thing out. There's logic that we're trying to set up to where you can just toggle this thing off. Because ideally, if we have one single hung family and just different mutton types within that, when we need to make a major edit to a window, we can change one family and load that into everything, and it fixes everything at once. Where if we have multiple types or multiple families that are doing the same thing, but they're different families, then that makes, each family is another edit. So realize that. And then some of you might have noticed this in the families that they'll typically have like a 1 or a 2 after the family. That is a copy that you've brought in. So what Revit doesn't do the best at understanding, like, hey, I already have this thing in here. So when you copy a new one in, it doesn't replace the existing one. It's like literally creating a new copy. Now, this, if I were to edit the single without having the 1 after it, it would not update this family. If I update the single 1, it doesn't update just the single version. So there's some ways that we can work through that, where we can go into our family property. And so if I do single 1, I could come here and be like, rename this and delete the 1. And that way it replaces, it eliminates that need to have that at the end. And so that way I can then batch reload, like I said before, of like, hey, I'm making one edit to 10 types and then loading all those in to the projects, whether they're in this project or another building. So those are really cool ways that we can kind of like alleviate the problems of editing those things.
I got
So
a quick question.
yeah,
So say you've got like a window type with no number, and then you've got a
hmm
window type 1 and then a window type 2. And two, I guess it's two questions. Technically, should we always be trying to use the one with zero with not a number behind it? So
yes,
it's the normal fam or the standard family. And
hmm
then what you were just describing, if I had a one and I were to take the one off of it and save it, technically there's two of the same name. Does it add the one with the previous number one behind it to the original, or does it force you into a scenario where you're deleting one or replacing the other, or kind of
that's a good point.
updating those?
So when working through this one, there's a few that are like you're using one and then you're using another. So in this case, this would be on the PA, in my opinion, to take and be like, we need to consolidate those into one family. You might have to take what is a single one and make the new types in the single to match those, and then we're going to purge out the single ones. So there's some management there that involves like understanding what you
Okay.
have and then being able to do that. So that then takes me to the schedule. So in Windows, we have what is called the call size. And the call size is typically what we say is the type. And we put the mutton style after it just so that we can better understand. Like we could have multiple 3 foot, 5, 6 windows, but because the the mutton type helps us better understand what the window is doing, we put that after that. Now, when we have a width and a height in our schedules, we want to show that as the call size. And what's happened here is that in this window, this 3 foot by 5 foot 6, that there we have the ability to, let me pull that in and I will put this here. And so what's happening is that the rough height and then the rough width, we're trying to be even. I've since then gone and fixed this based upon a, uh, let's pull that up. Um, okay, so this is probably the most boring catalog you could look at.
Oh,
Um, it is a bunch of windows with a bunch of different sizes, and like it can get really intimidating. But the real thing that I wanted to show you here is that Plygym does a really great job of talking about the call size, which is what we just talked about. And then you have your rough opening. And if you notice, like that is 2 3/8 no matter where you are. Like that's always a 2 3/8 value. Now on the height, that's a 3 1/16 inch increase from the call size. So what I can do is, let me do this, highlight and model, close, edit family. Now, what I've done is I've come in here and said the width is plus 2 inches and 3/8 for the rough width, and then the height is plus 3 inches and 1/16. So that way, whenever we change the call size, because we changed the window type size, whether it's a 2 by 4 or an 8 foot by 3 foot transom, whatever, like we can create types, and we are the architects, so we can say whatever size we want, and then we can go and look for the catalog size to be like, does this work or is this going to be custom? But the problem then becomes like, I need to make sure that my call size is the right size. So that should be 4 feet and this should be 2 feet. Okay. And so what's great about setting this up from the family is that when I load this into here and I override its parameter values and I come back to my starting view. This can take a while because it's a lot of types, it's a lot of windows, and the windows are in groups. So Revit's having to go and do that, is that you can see here that 2 foot by 4 foot updated, and now I've got my rough opening correct. Now I can just come here and say, I want to update these values to be the correct call size. So as I do that, it's updating the rough width and the rough height. Okay. And so this is what we're wanting to see. We want to have our schedule itself um, look cleaned up like this, to where our types match the call size and the width and the height match. And then because of that, we have our rough opening calculated based upon the catalog. And so this really helps us understand, like, we have a clean looking schedule, and then we have our types that match the height, and then our rough and width opening um, are calculated based upon that call size. So we're not having to input that every time or just say it's a 1/2 inch bigger, because we all dimension to the center line of the window, and then it's on the contractor to coordinate the opening size for us. So um, now we get into window legends. And so the legends are just a visual, like, graphic diagram of what the windows are. And the one of the benefits of Revit and using PyRevit is that we have this ability to say, like, hey, I've already got my windows in, but I want to lay them out and be able to see them. So if I come to this Pychalizer tab, which we can talk about how to add this tab to your Revit window, but there's this populate legend button. If I actually, I have to do this in reverse. I'm going to place a component, which in this case, I don't want a door, I want a window. Um, and then I want to make sure that I'm placing the elevation um, here. And so actually I want to open this up. So there's my window elevation. I'm going to go to the Pychalizer tab, click populate legend. I'm going to click window, click front, and then you click to place them. Now, what's really funny is that you're like, it's going to go through the spinning wheel of death and give me my windows at some point. Um, and then the benefit of this is that I'm not having to place these windows. I don't have to go through the project and say, like, well, I've got this one, I've got this one, I've got this one. It's doing the work for me from knowing that it's all there. So you're like, Kurt, it didn't do anything. Well, if you delete that one and then you zoom out, you can see that it did do all of it. So then we can go to the tag legend button, because tags do not work in Revit and legends. So if we did like a tag by category here, they do, like, you cannot tag these things, but we have the ability to tag, to cheat the way that it tags things. And so we can come here and say, I'm going to pick the text style where it's going to be positioned, and then I'm going to pick the parameter names that I want to tag it with. So for me, and for what we're doing right now, I'm going to pick the type mark, which keys me to the schedule, and the type name to understand what that type's telling me. So if I do that and then I click select parameters, it's going to go and find all the type marks for that window and the type names. So this is a little bit like, this looks like garbage. I can take this and, like, pull out my single hungs. I can take my fixed and put these up here, and then I've got all my transoms. Now, this still kind of looks like crap. You're like, Kurt, this is not usable. So we're gonna kind of spread these out. I'm going to move these over and just kind of spread them out for us to be able to look at better. Now, this is all great, but this is not aligned. I can go through and select these, and there's this other Revit tab called Revit Plus, and I can vertically align the top of all that, so it all automatically aligns my text to the top of what those were. So while, like, you can sit there and, like, manually align these and make sure that all these are in line. Sometimes your text, because of the window, can be varied based on that tag. So you can easily just come in here and just align to the top, align to the center, um, and it'll align those things to that. You can do the same with like if you were aligning stuff vertically, it would align the things in the vertical plane and like left or right justify them. So these are really cool efficiency tools that we can use to like quickly document what's going on. And then because I've already placed that view on my window schedule, I can see, or on my starting view, I can see what windows are in my project, and those are directly coordinated with what my is in my window schedule. So does anyone have any questions about like how windows are named, how their call sizes relate to their rough opening, or how like you document them within a legend? Cool. Well,
I will
that
have more
is
questions when we get to a building with more windows.
what you got, Matt.
This might be an early question, but since you picked Oxford Farms, how does this start getting into how it works where you've got lots of windows from multiple models?
Yeah, so this is a question for the PM and how the project is delivered. Um, for right now, they're being coordinated per building, so I'm not necessarily worried about what a 3056 window the type Mark A is and how that relates to building 3. But if we needed to, we could easily go through and open up the site file and then use that to aggregate everything. And then what I would do is go through each legend and copy because you're not using, this gets into a larger site file discussion, but you could copy the elements from the legend into the site file, and that's how you're coordinating a project-wide schedule in Legend. And so that way you make sure that like how, and you're, this is where it gets tedious and you're trying to coordinate across 10 buildings. So in this case, I was able to just be like each type, which we'll talk more about this week in the Revit training about schedules. But in this case, I'm sorting this based upon the type mark. Our windows are all different types. And so we give them a type mark. And then I can then say like, hey, like I don't have to itemize every instance because then it would look like this. And it's like, that's really intimidating.
Mhm.
And I don't need to do that. We are trying to lean that down so we can just say undo that. But then I will mess this up because I set it up. So let's just take the F and make that an A. And I want to make that a capital A. And this is what it's going to do. It's going to give me that type mark A varies, that the description is the same, the manufacturer is the same, but I have two different sizes. Now, the way that if this happened in a project, the way that I would work through this to be like, uh-oh, like I've got to fix this, is I would start coming into here and say, I'm going to sort it based upon that and its type, or I could come in here and sort it based upon its width and its height. Um, in this case, I'm just going to do it by its type, and I can see that there's a discrepancy between the A 2 foot, the 2.6 by 5.0 by 3.0 by 5.6. So in this case, I could come and be like, oh, I don't have a B, so I could come and be like, that's B, and place that there. And then for our purpose and what we're trying to show, then I would need to come back here and mass select this filter, text notes, delete the text notes again. I'm going to go back to PyChalizer, tag the legend, and then type mark type name,
Couple
and then
steps.
it'll reset that. And so then I can come back
Whoops.
here, select these, and say I want to Revit Plus vertically align, and start aligning these to like clean that up. So You don't have to sit here and be like, okay, I need to move that there and move this here. And like this becomes very manual. And this is what we want to try to avoid because we have tools that do that for us.
Hmm.
So, but if you update the schedule, it does not update this. If I were to like this one is, I think you messaged me about this one, that the 3/1 is not actually a 3/1. This is actually a 2 over
Yeah, it's
1.
supposed to be a 2/1. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's go and find that one in the project. Um, uh, that's a locked orientation. So here we go. So in this case, you have your 2/1. Great call type, but the problem is that the mutton option is set to the 3/1 option. And so we need to set that to the custom colonial, and we're going to apply that. And then this is going to be a 2/1. And then in this case, we are going to hide the bottom mutton visibility. And it's going to be like that. So you can quickly like work through those mutton styles and be like, okay, let's just say I wanted to create a new type, and that it's going to be a 1/2. So if I did that, duplicate this, you get your new type, and I say it's a 1/2. I can then come here, instead of the bottom being hidden, the top is being hidden, and then it puts it in the bottom. Okay. And so it's the same window size, but it has a different mutton style. So therefore it's a different type in the project. Now, when I go back to my window schedule, um, you will see I did not change that type. Um, you have this one here, I believe. Where did that one go? When you make a duplicate type, you want to make sure that you're changing this type mark to make sure that you're not having an overriding of that type. So just be aware that like this type mark is literally talking about this type, and that that's how we want to show our elevations and our legends, and that's how we tag them, is based upon that parameters, the type mark. So I don't need that, and ignore that I did that. So does anyone have
Matt,
any other questions?
oh, I was just going to say, to go back to Matt's question about managing it across multiple buildings. For example, for the Leo cottages and the capstone cottages, we coordinate those across the whole program so that those window schedules always get printed out of the site file and not per building. And it makes sense for those because we know that there's a limited number of window types, and that way we can kind of plug and play whichever cottage types are in any particular project. So those get coordinated through the site file, and everything in the program is consistent. But then when we go to like a Point Hope project where we have cottages and we have multifamily buildings, generally we'll try to keep the cottages because they're already coordinated within their program, and then we'll handle the multifamily buildings differently. And they'll get actually printed, or those schedules get done per building. So it really doesn't matter what the type of project is, and then talking to the PM.
Yeah, for sure. And that's really just that BIM strategy that is how the project's being delivered, has a major part in how we're wanting to aggregate everything. And so this is a great example of like you have your, a great looking building too, which is a larger multifamily with a double loaded corridor. A little bit more detail going into it. There's something like 20 something windows in it, different types of windows, to, hey, I have a liner building which has two windows and some louvers. So this is a great example of like, this is that sort of mixture of what a cottage is like, where it's very minimal fenestrations, to we have a lot of a lot more in our town center work and our like bigger multifamilies, and that it can look different, but it's the same logic that goes into each of them. That I'm just trying to like filter down what I've got. I'm trying to display that per project, and that way when we are working through the design, we can quickly understand like what is there and what is being documented. So I've just been putting these legends and schedules on the start page so that way the project teams can begin to understand like these are the window types in here. Like, is this something that we're going to run into in as we design through it, that we need to like have a better understanding of where the types are and to like solidify like do we need all these different types or they need to be combined into similar types kind of thing. So just a lot of thought needs to when we're trying to get ahead of design, making sure that we're documenting the things that we know get documented and not waiting to the end to then start documenting some of this stuff. So that's kind of it for today. Does anyone have any other questions or comments?
Not on this, Kurt, but when you finish up, could I get a question, private question with you?
Yeah. All right, y'all. See you at 10.
Sweet.